I burned the foreclosure notice in my kitchen stove on a Tuesday afternoon while my children were still at school. The banker, Mordecai Crane, had nailed it to my front door at precisely 2 o'clock. He did not knock. He did not wait. He simply hammered the nail into the wood my late husband, Barnabas, had planed smooth with his own hands 7 years ago, turned his black horse around and rode back toward town without once looking at the house he was taking from us. I heard the knock of iron against wood from where I stood kneading bread dough. I wiped the flour from my hands, walked to the front door, opened it, read the notice once, slowly letting each word settle into the hollow place in my chest where hope used to live. Then I pulled it off the nail with both hands, walked back to my kitchen, opened the stove door, and fed every word to the fire. I watched the ink curl and blacken. Watched the date, March 15th, 1887, disappear into ash. Watched the number at the bottom, the sum Barnabas had borrowed to buy the seed stock that was supposed to carry us through, turn to smoke and float up the chimney into the winter sky. 60 days. That was all the time I had left before Mordecai Crane owned everything my husband had built. The ranch house with its wide porch and the bedroom where I still slept on one side of the bed. The barn Barnabas had raised beam by beam the summer before Genevieve was born. The 40 acres of grazing land. The well that drew the cleanest water for 30 miles in any direction. 60 days before my children and I became wanderers in a territory that did not forgive widows who could not pay their debts. I closed the stove door and went back to my bread dough. If you have never been a widow with 3 children and a debt you cannot pay, you may not understand what I did next. I did not cry. I did not pray, though I had been raised to do both in times of trouble. I did not sit down at my kitchen table and calculate impossible numbers the way I had done every night for the past 3 years. I simply kept kneading the dough. Because the one thing I had learned in the 3 years since they brought Barnabas home from the mine was this: you can fall apart, or you can make bread. You can let the world see you break, or you can put your hands into something real and keep moving until the breaking passes. I chose bread. The children came home as the winter sun was starting its early descent behind the western mountains. Genevieve, first as always, her 16-year-old face already learning the lines of worry that came from being the oldest child in a house where something was always about to break. She stopped in the doorway, looked at me, looked at the fresh loaves cooling on the sideboard, looked at my face again with those sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. "How bad?" she asked. 60 days. She set down her school books without removing her coat, stood very still in the way her father used to stand when the numbers refused to add up in his favor. "March 15th, she said. Not a question, a confirmation. Yes. We could sell the mare. Then we have no horse come spring. We could take in more travelers. Nobody travels through Wyoming in January, Genevieve. Then what do we? I will figure it out." I pulled the last loaf from the oven, set it beside the others, turned to face my daughter. "I always do." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her coat, hung it on its hook with careful precision, and said nothing else. That was the thing about Genevieve. She had learned in the hardest way possible when her mother's voice closed a door. She had learned not to push against it. Had learned it the winter her father died when I had gone 4 days without sleeping. And she kept asking questions until I sat her down at the same kitchen table at 2 in the morning and said very quietly, "I need you to stop asking me things I do not have answers to." She had not pushed since. Artemisia came in 20 minutes later, her dark hair full of snow, stopping in the doorway to remove her boots with the careful attention of an 11-year-old who had been told too many times about tracking mud across clean floors. She had Barnabas's gentleness in a small frame, his way of seeing everything and saying almost nothing. She looked at my face, looked at Genevieve's face, did not ask a single question, simply crossed the kitchen, pressed herself against my side for exactly 4 seconds, then went to wash her hands at the basin. Anselm arrived last, boots slamming on the porch, the door crashing open with the particular violence of an 8-year-old boy who had been outside all day and had no interest in transitioning quietly back to indoor life. "There's a blizzard coming," he announced. "Jeremiah's pa says it's going to be the worst one since 1878. Jeremiah's father said the same thing about last January," I said, setting bowls on the table, "and we got 4 inches. "Yeah, but this time he seemed real sure. Wash your hands." "Mama, are the cows going to freeze? Because if the cows freeze..." "Anselm," Genevieve pointed at the basin. "Hands, now." He went, still talking, but he went. By the time supper was on the table, the wind had picked up enough to rattle the shutters. By the time I cleared the dishes, it was coming in hard from the north, driving snow sideways across the yard, in sheets that erased the fence line, erased the road, erased everything beyond 20 feet of the house. Anselm pressed his face against the kitchen window and watched it like it was a show arranged specifically for his entertainment. Those cows are definitely freezing, he said. They are in the barn with fresh straw, I told him. They have survived Wyoming winters longer than you have been alive. Bess looked cold this morning. Bess always looks cold. It is her natural expression. Artemisia laughed a small sound quickly covered. Even Genevieve's mouth moved. I sent the children to bed at 8. Artemisia went without argument, and Anselm negotiated for 10 more minutes lost and departed with the particular slowness of a boy maximizing the distance between a command and its compliance. Genevieve stayed at the table with her mending her needle, moving steadily through a torn shirt hem. You going to sleep? She asked without looking up. In a while. Mama, the needle stopped. We will figure it out, I said. March is still a long way off. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw in her face what I had been trying not to see for 3 years, that this child was no longer a child, that she had aged in ways that had nothing to do with birthdays, that she was 16 years old and already carrying the weight of a woman who knew exactly how close her family stood to the edge of losing everything. I know we will, she said quietly. Then softer still, I just wish you did not have to figure it out alone. I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed with my boots still on, gave myself exactly 60 seconds to feel what I needed to feel. The fear, the exhaustion, the bone-deep loneliness of being the only thing standing between my children and disaster. 60 seconds. I had started doing this after Barnabas died. 1 minute counted out to acknowledge what was there and then put it back where it needed to go so I could keep functioning. Not more than a minute, just enough to know it was real. Then I would stand up and keep going. I was at 47 seconds when I heard it. 3 knocks on the front door. Slow, deliberate. The knock of someone who was not certain they had the right to knock at all. I sat very still. Then I stood, walked to the kitchen, took Barnabas's shotgun from its hook behind the door, and went to see who would be traveling through a blizzard at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night to arrive at a widow's door. The man on my porch was covered in snow, from hat to boot. The kind of covering that came from being in the open for a long time before finding a place to stop. His coat was heavy canvas dark with moisture. His hat was pulled low. His hands were at his sides, palms out, fingers spread. The posture of a man who had faced guns before and knew exactly what helped. Ma'am, his voice was rough from cold. I am not asking for much. Just out of the wind long enough to feel my feet again. I can sleep in your barn if you have one. I will not be any trouble. I looked at him, then past him at the yard full of driving snow. The road completely erased the temperature, dropping so fast I could feel it even through the open door. I looked at his hands. That was what I always looked at. A man's hands told you everything his mouth would not. These hands were wrong, not wrong in any way I could have explained to someone else, just wrong in the way that working hands had a story written into them. The scarring, the thickening, the particular way skin set over knuckles after years of rope and wood and frozen metal. This man's hands were clean in the creases, the kind of clean that did not come from washing, the kind that came from never having done the work in the first place. But the storm was real. In his eyes, what I could see of them under the shadow of his hat held something I recognized. Not danger, something else. Something weary and ancient like water-worn stone. What is your horse's name? I asked. A pause, brief, then Nightshade. I had learned over 37 years that a man who named his horse Nightshade was either dangerously sentimental or lying about something bigger. I had not yet decided which was worse. Put her in the barn, I said. Second stall. There is dry hay. Come to the back door when you are done. I will leave the lamp on. I lowered the barrel of the gun. He looked at me for a moment. Then he touched the brim of his hat with 2 fingers and turned back into the blizzard. I closed the door, stood in the hallway with the shotgun in my hands, listening to the wind. Then I went to the kitchen and put a pot of bean soup back on the stove to warm. His name, he said, was Elijah Kane. Just that. No last name offered with any conviction, and I did not press because I had lived long enough to know that men traveling through Wyoming in January with names that felt borrowed were either running from something or resting from something, and in either case the truth of their name was beside the point. He sat where I pointed at the far end of the kitchen table, hat in his lap. When I set the soup and bread in front of him, I saw his hands again in the lamplight, and that quiet watchfulness at the back of my mind stirred again. This is more than I expected, he said. I make too much soup, always have. I sat across from him with my coffee, looked at him properly for the first time. Late 50s, I thought, maybe 60. Gray at the temples and in 3 days of beard. Lines around his eyes, the kind earned outdoors. But there was something in those eyes I could not immediately name. A depth that suggested he had seen more winters than his face revealed. You run this place alone, he asked. 3 children and me. Your husband gone, Fayin. The word I used was strangers. Not dead, Just gone the way a fire went when it burned through everything it had. He nodded, did not ask more. The floorboard in the hallway creaked. Anselm appeared in the doorway in his nightshirt, dark eyes moving between me and the stranger, with the expression of a boy who had been told to stay in bed enough times to have developed genuine skill in ignoring the instruction. "Who is that?" he asked. "A traveler. Bed. Is he staying in barn?" Anselm looked at the stranger with an expression that was not quite suspicion and not quite sympathy. "Our barn has got a hole in the north corner. Wind comes straight through. You will want to put your bedroll on the south side if you do not want to freeze." The stranger looked at my son. Something moved across his face. Quick, controlled, gone before I could properly read it. "Much obliged," he said, and he said it the way people said things when they actually meant them. Also, Anselm continued warming to his subject. "Bess, she is the brown mare she kicks in her sleep, so do not put your head near her stall." "How old are you?" the stranger asked. "8. My sisters are 11 and 16. He leaned against the doorframe. "You manage all of this, the ranch, the children, the winter." "I manage what needs managing." The stranger turned his cup slowly between his palms. "What kind of work do you do when you are not traveling?" A pause, half a second too long. "Whatever needs doing," he said. "Fences, timber, whatever pays. I have a wood supply running short before February." "Yes, ma'am, I can do that." "I do not have money to pay you. Meals and dry shelter is wages enough in this weather." I looked at him across the table. He looked back. No hostility on either side. Just two people who had both lived long enough to know when an answer was an answer and when it was a redirection, and to decide whether to press. I did not press. "Snow like this runs 3 days sometimes," I said. "Stay until it breaks. After that, we talk about the wood." I stood, moved to the basin. "There are blankets on the hook inside the barn door," I said. "Soup can warm again in the morning." "You are generous." "I am practical." I turned, dried my hands. "I need that wood split before February. You need to not freeze to death in my yard. Neither of us is doing the other a favor. We are just solving the same problem from different ends." He was quiet for a moment. "Yes, ma'am," and he said, "I suppose we are." I showed him out the back with a lamp and the blankets. Watch the light appear in the small barn window across the dark yard, a square of yellow in all that white and black. Then I bolted the door. Genevieve was waiting in the hallway when I turned around. "Who is he?" she asked. "A traveler. Does he seem—" "He seems cold," I said, "and hungry, and tired in a way that has nothing to do with riding through snow." I looked at my daughter's face in the shadows. Saw the worry there. The protective instinct that had grown too large too fast in the 3 years since her father died. "Sleep," I told her. "We will see what morning brings." I went to my own room, sat on the edge of the bed, did not take my boots off for a long moment. I thought about the stranger's hands, the pauses in his speech, the way he had said much obliged to Anselm like it was not something he gave away freely. I thought about the name Elijah Kane and how it sat in the air, like a coat that did not quite fit. But mostly I thought about his eyes, about that quality I had seen there, that depth that went beyond simple weariness, like a man carrying the weight of more years than his body showed. I took off my boots, lay down on my side of the bed the way I had every night for 3 years, and I closed my eyes and told myself that in the morning, I would know better what kind of man I had invited into my barn. In the morning, I would see clearly. But that night in the dark, with the wind howling and the snow erasing the world outside my windows, all I could think was this: for the first time in 3 years, I was not the only person lying awake on this property staring into darkness and wondering how to survive until spring. And that was its own kind of company, even if I did not yet know what to do with it. The blizzard broke on the third morning. The snow stopped around noon, the sky clearing to a hard, bright blue that hurt to look at. The temperature dropped another 15 degrees as the clouds moved off, and by mid-afternoon, the world outside my windows was a study in white and shadow, beautiful and merciless in equal measure. I had seen Elijah Kane working at different hours during those 3 days, always early or late, never in full sun. Each time I brought coffee or food to the barn, the pile of split wood had grown impossibly fast. Too fast for one man working alone. But it was what I did not see that stayed with me. The bread and meat I left in the barn remained untouched each morning. When I looked out my window in the deepest part of night, lamplight always glowed in the barn window, as though he never slept at all. The children noticed too. "He is strange," Genevieve said on the second evening, keeping her voice low as we cleared his supper dishes. "Did you see his hands too smooth for a man who claims to work timber?" I had seen, but I said nothing. Artemisia, who had been sitting quietly in the corner with her schoolwork, looked up. "He is sad," she said simply. Genevieve and I both turned to look at her. "What makes you say that?" I asked. Artemisia set down her pencil, looked at me with those strange dark eyes that sometimes saw things I did not want her to see. I do not know, she said slowly. It is just, when I look at him, I feel like something in him is very, very old and very, very tired. He is a stranger doing work for shelter, Genevieve said. He does not need you feeling sad for him. But Artemisia just looked at her older sister with that quiet, knowing expression. Everyone needs someone to feel sad for them sometimes, she said. Even strangers, maybe especially strangers. That night after the children were in bed, I stood at my kitchen window and watched the barn. The lamp was lit again. I could see the glow through the cracks in the boards. And I found myself wondering what kind of man traveled alone through Wyoming in January. What kind of man worked with impossible speed? What kind of man never ate and never slept? I did not have answers, but I had a feeling deep in my bones that Elijah Kane, if that was even his name, was not what he appeared to be. And I had learned in 37 hard years of living that when a feeling like that settled into your bones, you paid attention to it. Because feelings like that were how you survived. On the morning the blizzard broke, Elijah Kane was already at work when I came outside with coffee. He had cleared a path from the house to the barn, had mucked out the stalls, had split enough wood to add another 3 feet to the pile against the barn wall. I stopped at the edge of the path and looked at what he had done. It was too much work for one night. Too much work for any normal man working alone in the cold and dark. He saw me looking, set down the axe. Morning, he said. You have been busy. Could not sleep. I walked across the yard, held out one of the cups. He took it and our fingers brushed for just a moment. His skin was cold, not winter cold, something else, like stone that had never known warmth. How much wood do you need to get through February? He asked. I looked at the remaining logs stacked against the fence, did the calculation in my head the way I had done it 100 times before, the way a woman did math when the numbers had always mattered. Double what you have done, I said. Maybe more if the cold holds past the 20th. I will have it done by nightfall. I looked at him, really looked at him in the clean morning light, saw the lines around his eyes, the gray in his beard, the way he held himself with a kind of careful control, like a man who was always conscious of taking up exactly the right amount of space. You do not have to prove anything, I said. He looked at me then, and for just a moment, something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like surprise. I am not trying to prove anything, ma'am, he said quietly. I am just trying to be useful. Why? The question came out before I could stop it. He was quiet for a long moment, turned the coffee cup in his hands. Because for a very long time, he said slowly, I have not been useful to anyone, and I had forgotten what it felt like. There was something in his voice when he said it, something raw and honest that made my chest ache. I opened my mouth to say something what I did not know, but Anselm's voice cut through the cold air. Mama, can I help Mr. Kane with the wood? I turned. My son was standing on the back porch in his coat and 2 small boots already heading down the steps before I could answer. You have schoolwork, I called. I finished it last night. Please, Mama. I know how to stack wood good. Real good. Papa taught me. He said it without any weight. Just a fact. Papa taught me. But I saw something cross Elijah Kane's face when he heard it. Something that looked like pain. It is all right, Kane said before I could answer. I could use the help. Anselm was across the yard in seconds, already chattering about the proper way to split pine versus oak, the way his father had taught him, the way you had to watch the grain and hit just off center or the axe would stick. I watched them for a moment. Watched this stranger listen to my 8-year-old son with the kind of focused attention that made it clear he was not just being polite. He was actually listening. Then I went back inside to start breakfast. But I looked out the window while I worked, and I saw Elijah Kane kneel down to Anselm's height, saw him take a piece of wood and turn it over in his hands while my son explained something with the serious intensity of a child who knew he was imparting important knowledge. Saw Kane split the wood exactly where Anselm had indicated. Saw my son's face light up with pride. And I thought whoever this man is, whatever he is running from, or hiding from, or trying to find, he is good with children. And that mattered. That mattered more than clean hands or strange hours or names that did not quite fit. Artemisia came to the barn while I was calling the others in for breakfast. I saw her from the kitchen window. Saw her walk across the yard with that particular deliberate slowness she had. The walk of a child who was never in a hurry because she was always thinking about 7 things at once. She did not go inside the barn. She stood in the doorway, just stood there looking in. I could not see Kane from my angle, Could not see what she was seeing, but I saw her tilt her head in that way she had. The way that meant she was seeing something that no one else could see. Then she turned around and walked back to the house. When she came inside, her face was very still. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing, Mama." "Artemisia." She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something I had never seen before. Not fear, not exactly, but something close to it. "The man in the barn," she said slowly. "Mama, he is not. He is not like other people." "What do you mean?" She bit her lip, looked down at her hands. "I do not know how to say it right," she whispered. But when the sun came through the barn door, his shadow was wrong. Wrong how? It did not match his body. She looked up at me. And Mama, when I looked real close, I could see through him. Just a little, like he was not quite all the way here. My hands stilled on the dish I was washing. "What are you talking about?" "I do not know," she said. "But Mama, I think—" The back door opened. Cain came in with Anselm, both of them stamping snow from their boots. Artemisia went silent immediately, but she kept her eyes on Cain, and he, I noticed, did not look at her at all. Breakfast was tense in a way I could not quite explain. Genevieve was watchful and quiet. Artemisia barely touched her food. Anselm talked nonstop about wood splitting, oblivious to the undercurrents in the room. And Elijah Cain sat at the end of the table and went through the motions of eating without ever actually putting food in his mouth. After the meal, the children scattered. Genevieve to her chores. Anselm back outside, despite the cold. And Artemisia to the corner with her books, where she sat and pretended to read, but actually watched Cain with those dark, knowing eyes. Cain stood to leave. "Mr. Cain," I said. He stopped, turned. "Yes, ma'am." "What are you?" I asked quietly. The kitchen went very still. He looked at me, then at Artemisia in the corner, then back at me. "I am a man who is trying to remember what it means to be human," he said. "That is not an answer." "No, ma'am, I suppose it is not." He picked up his hat, walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the latch. "But it is the only one I have right now," he said without turning around. Then he went out into the cold. I looked at Artemisia. She looked back at me. "Mama," she whispered, "I am scared." "Of what?" "I do not know." She clutched her book to her chest. "But whatever he is not supposed to be here. I can feel it. And I think something bad is coming." I crossed the kitchen, knelt down in front of my daughter, took her hands in mine. "Listen to me, Sam," I said. "Whatever he is or is not, he has done nothing to hurt us. He has worked. He has been kind to your brother. He has asked for nothing but shelter." "But Mama, I know you see things," I said gently. "I know you have always seen things that the rest of us do not see, and I trust you. But until he gives us a reason to fear him, we will not." Artemisia looked at me with wide eyes. "But what if by the time he gives us a reason, it is too late?" I did not have an answer to that. So I held my daughter close and listened to the wind outside and wondered what kind of man I had invited to stay under my roof, and whether my 11-year-old child could see something I could not, and whether I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. That night, long after the children were asleep, I stood at my window and looked out at the barn. The lamp was burning again, and in the small square of yellow light, I saw a shadow move, a shadow that seemed to shift and waver in ways that did not match any human form. I stood there for a long time. Then I went to Barnabas's old trunk in the corner of the room, the one I had not opened in 3 years. Inside, beneath his good shirt and the Bible his mother had given him, I found what I was looking for: his journal, the one he had kept in the months before he died, the one he had never let me read. I opened it to the last entry dated 2 weeks before the mind collapse that took him, and I read, "There are things in this world that are not what they seem, things that walk among us but are not of us. I have seen evidence of them near the old church ruins. Evidence I cannot explain. Evidence that terrifies me. If anything happens to me, if I do not come home, Rosalind must know this land is not just land. It is protected ground, sacred ground, and there are those who would do anything to claim it. I pray she never has to face what I have faced. But if she does, I pray she is stronger than I was. And I pray she knows that some debts are not what they appear to be." I closed the journal, looked out the window at the barn, at the shadow that moved in the lamplight, and I understood with a cold certainty that settled into my bones that nothing about Elijah Cain's arrival at my door had been an accident, that the foreclosure notice, the blizzard, the stranger, and the storm, all of it was connected, and that my 60 days were about to become something far more dangerous than a simple debt to a banker. They were about to become a reckoning. I confronted Elijah Cain the morning after I read Barnabas's journal. I found him in the barn mucking out the stalls in the pre-dawn darkness, working with that same impossible efficiency I had observed for days. He looked up when I entered, saw my face, set down the pitchfork immediately. You read something, he said. Not a question. My husband's journal. He went very still. He knew, I said. He knew there were things in this world that were not what they seemed. He wrote about evidence near the old church ruins, about this land being sacred ground, about debts that were not what they appeared to be. I walked closer, stopped 3 feet away. So I am going to ask you one more time, and I need the truth. What are you? The silence stretched between us. I could hear Bess shifting in her stall, could hear the wind moving through the gap in the north wall that Anselm had warned him about that first night, could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. My name, he said finally, is not Elijah Kane. I know. It is Alaric Blackwood. The name sat in the air between us like something solid, something with weight. And 800 years ago, he continued, his voice very quiet, I became something that should not exist, something that has walked this earth long after I should have returned to it. I waited. I am what your husband feared, he said, what he saw evidence of near those ruins, what he spent the last months of his life trying to understand. Say it plainly. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something shift, something that had been carefully held in place suddenly loosening. I am a vampire, Mrs. Thorne, and I am very, very old. I should have run. I should have grabbed my children and fled into the winter morning and never looked back. But I did not, because standing there in the barn looking at this man, this thing who had split my wood and listened to my son and carried himself with such careful gentleness, I understood something. I understood that whatever he was also profoundly alone. And loneliness was something I knew better than fear. Why are you here? I asked. I came looking for something true, he said, something real. I have spent 8 centuries surrounded by power and wealth and people who wanted things from me, and all of it felt like ash, empty, meaningless. He looked down at his hands. I came to this territory to find what I had lost, or perhaps what I never had. I did not know your family existed. I did not know about this land or your debt or your husband's history. But 2 days ago I discovered something. He met my eyes again. The debt you owe. The foreclosure notice Mordecai Crane nailed to your door. It is part of a financial portfolio that belongs to me. The barn tilted slightly. What? I own a holding company. Have owned it for over a century, moving it through various names, various lawyers. 6 years ago, my advisors packaged 43 territory loans into an investment portfolio. I signed the papers without reading each individual note. He paused. Your husband's loan was one of them. I stepped back. You own my debt. Yes. You have owned it this entire time. Yes. And you came here to my home knowing this and you said nothing. No, His voice was firm. I came here knowing nothing. I discovered the connection 3 days ago when I saw documents in town with Crane's name on them. I have spent 3 days trying to decide what to do with that information. You could have told me immediately. Yes. You could have ripped up the debt right there. Yes. But you did not. He was quiet for a moment. I wanted to understand first, he said. I wanted to know what kind of woman could raise 3 children alone, what kind of strength that required, what kind of person shared her last bread with a stranger in a storm. You were testing me. No. The word came out sharp, definite. I was not testing you. I was trying to understand what it meant that for the first time in 300 years I cared about the outcome of something, that I cared whether a family I had never met kept their home. He took a step toward me. I was trying to understand why, when I looked at your son teaching me how to split wood, I felt something I had not felt in so long. I had forgotten the name for it. What was it? Hope, he said quietly. The hope that I could still be something other than what I have been. I looked at him in the dim barn light, at this creature who was not a man who had lived 800 years, who owned the debt that would take my home, who had come to my door seeking redemption. I do not know what to do with this, I said. Neither do I. Can you clear the debt? Yes, with a single letter to my lawyers. Then do it. Is that what you want? I stared at him. What kind of question is that? Of course that is what I want. I want my children to keep their home. I want to stop waking up at 3 a.m, calculating impossible numbers. You want it to be yours, he said, not mine. You want to have earned it. And God help me, he was right. I stood there in my own barn facing the creature who could save everything with a stroke of a pen, and I understood that what I wanted was not salvation. What I wanted was to have fought for it myself. What I wanted was for my children to know that their mother had held this family together through sheer will and work, not through the charity of a vampire who felt guilty about his investments. I do not know you, I said. I do not know what you are or what you want or why you are really here. But I know this: I have been holding my family together for 3 years without anyone's help. And I need to know I can do it for 60 more days. Even if you cannot. Especially if I cannot. He looked at me for a long moment. Your husband, he said slowly, wrote that some debts are not what they appear to be. Do you know what he meant? No. I think I do. He walked to the barn door, looked out at the snow-covered yard. I think he knew that Mordecai Crane is not just a banker. My blood went cold. What is he? Alaric turned to face me. He is like me, he said. Old, powerful, and very, very patient. The world I thought I understood cracked open. Crane is a vampire. Worse, he is an ancient vampire who has spent centuries building financial empires, controlling territory, slowly acquiring power through legal means rather than violence. Alaric's jaw tightened. And 200 years ago, he was my general, my right hand, until I banished him for massacring an entire village of humans. Why? Because I was trying to be something other than a monster. His voice was bitter. I was trying to rule with something resembling honor. And he reminded me of what we were, what I was. A predator pretending to be a king. And now he is here. Now he is here. Alaric looked at me. And your land is not just land, Mrs. Thorne. Your husband knew that. This property sits on what we call sanctuary ground. Sacred earth. Ground that vampires cannot claim through force. Only through legal transfer, I whispered, understanding. Only through legal transfer. Through debt. Through foreclosure. Through making you willingly sign it over. The loan, I said. He gave Barnabas the loan knowing it would be difficult to repay. Knowing that eventually circumstances would force you to default. Knowing that he could then claim the land legally through human law and the sacred protections would not stop him. I sat down on a hay bale. Why does he want it? Because sanctuary ground is rare, powerful, and with the right ritual performed on the right night, it can be corrupted, turned from a place of protection into a place of darkness. Alaric knelt in front of me. He wants to perform what we call the Eternal Night Ritual. It will block out the sun permanently across the entire Western Territory, create a kingdom of darkness where vampires can walk freely at any hour. And he needs my land to do it. He needs your land, the blood of a vampire king. Alaric's voice dropped, and the sacrifice of an innocent with the sight. I stood up so fast I knocked over the hay bale. Artemisia. Yes. You are telling me he wants to sacrifice my daughter. On the next new moon, February 20th, 23 days from now. I could not breathe, could not think, could only see my 11-year-old daughter's face, her dark eyes the way she had looked at Alaric and said his shadow was wrong. I will kill him, I said. You cannot. Watch me. Mrs. Thorne. Do not Mrs. Thorne me. I whirled on him. You are telling me that some ancient vampire has been planning to murder my child for years, that he engineered my husband's death. I do not know if that he gave us a loan we could not repay, that he has been circling my family like a vulture waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And you expect me to what? Stand here and discuss it calmly. No, Alaric said quietly. I expect you to let me help you stop him. Why should I trust you? You are one of them. I am the only thing standing between your daughter and a ritual that will rip her soul from her body and use it to poison the sun itself. His voice was hard now, commanding, the voice of someone who had ruled for centuries and had not forgotten how. I am the only creature in this territory old enough and strong enough to fight Mordecai Crane and have any chance of winning, and I am the only one who knows the ritual well enough to stop it. Why? I demanded. Why would you help us? Because 800 years ago, I performed that ritual myself. The barn went silent. I created the first eternal night, he said, across a kingdom in Eastern Europe. Thousands died. Crops failed. Entire bloodlines were extinguished. And when I finally understood what I had done, when I finally broke the ritual and let the sun return, I swore I would never let it happen again. He stood. Mordecai was there. He saw the power it gave us, the control. And he has wanted to recreate it ever since. I banished him to stop him, but I underestimated his patience. And now he is here. And now he is here. And if we do not stop him, your daughter dies, your land becomes corrupted, and this entire territory falls into darkness that will not lift in your lifetime or your grandchildren's lifetimes. I looked at him, at this creature who had lived 800 years, who had committed atrocities I could not imagine, who had come to my door in a blizzard looking for redemption, who was asking me to trust him with my daughter's life. What do we do? I asked. Before he could answer, Genevieve's voice cut through the cold morning air. Mama, someone is coming. I ran from the barn. Across the yard past the woodpile up onto the porch where Genevieve stood pointing toward the road. A rider was approaching. Black horse, black coat, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going and had no doubt of his welcome. Mordecai Crane, Alaric said from behind me, and I felt for the first time in 3 years something stronger than grief. I felt rage. Mordecai Crane did not dismount. He sat his horse in my yard like he already owned it. Like the house and the barn and the 40 acres were already his, and I was simply a tenant he was graciously visiting. He was perhaps 60 in appearance, broad in the chest, well-dressed in a way that made everyone around him look shabby by comparison. His eyes were dark and sharp and missed nothing. Those eyes swept across my porch, across Genevieve standing beside me, across the yard to where Alaric had stopped halfway between the barn and the house, and I saw recognition flare in them. Recognition and something else. Satisfaction. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "What a pleasure to see you on this fine morning." "Mr. Crane, I'm trying..." I kept my voice level. "This is unexpected." "Is it? I was passing through from the Callaway property and thought I should check on my investment." His eyes flicked to Alaric again, then back to me. "I see you have taken on help. Seasonal labor." He shifted in his saddle. "I wanted to discuss your situation, Mrs. Thorne. March 15th approaches, and I would hate to see you and your children displaced in spring weather over a debt that could be resolved more amicably. The debt will be paid." "Will it?" He said it without inflection. Just 2 words laid flat on the cold air. "Because the numbers I am looking at suggest otherwise. Even with a full season of travelers, which you will not have until April, you are significantly short." "I am aware of my own finances." "Of course you are." He smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Which is why I want to make you an offer. The land, the water rights, the buildings. I will pay you enough to clear the debt and have something left over. Enough to take your children somewhere less harsh. This is my home. Your late husband's home," he corrected gently. "And he is gone, Mrs. Thorne. The land is just land." "The land is not just land," I said, and I watched his eyes narrow slightly. "And I am not leaving. You may not have a choice. I will find a way." "Will you?" He looked past me to Alaric again. "With the help of a drifter, a man whose name you probably do not even know. His name," I said carefully, "is his own business." Mordecai's smile widened. "Is it? How fascinating." He gathered his reins. "I will be back, Mrs. Thorne. In 2 weeks, let us say, to discuss your options again. I do hope you will reconsider, for your children's sake." His eyes found Genevieve, lingered there for just a moment too long. "Such a lovely family you have built. It would be a shame to see it scattered." Then he turned his horse and rode away. I stood on the porch until the sound of hoofbeats had completely faded, until there was nothing but wind and silence and the terrible understanding of what had just happened. "Mama," Genevieve's voice was small. "What did he mean?" I looked at my daughter, at her 16-year-old face already too old for her years. "Go inside," I said. "Get your sister and brother. We need to talk." When the 4 of us were gathered in the kitchen, I told them everything. I told them about Alaric, about what he was, about the debt and the ritual and Mordecai's plan. Anselm listened with wide eyes clutching the edge of the table. Artemisia went very pale and very still. And Genevieve, my practical protective, Genevieve stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "No," she said. "Genevieve, no." She looked at Alaric, who had been standing silently in the corner. "You are telling me that you are a monster, that the banker is a monster, that our father knew about monsters and that is why he died. And you expect us to just, what, trust you?" "I do not expect anything," Alaric said quietly. "Good, because I do not trust you. I do not believe you, and I want you gone." "Genevieve," I started, but she whirled on me. "How can you believe him, Mama? How can you stand there and listen to this madness and not see that he is using us?" "I do not think he is." "Then you are a fool." The kitchen went silent. Genevieve looked at me with eyes that were too bright, too fierce. "Papa would not have wanted this," she said, her voice shaking. "He would not have wanted you trusting monsters to protect us." "Your father," Alaric said, "kept a journal documenting evidence of vampires near the old church ruins. He knew we existed. He spent the last months of his life trying to understand how to protect this land from us." Genevieve turned on him. "Do not talk about my father. You did not know him." "No, but I know what it is to lose everything trying to protect something you love. And I know what it is to fail." He took a step forward. "Your mother is not a fool. She is the strongest person I have met in 800 years. And if she is willing to listen to me, perhaps you should consider that she sees something you do not. I see a monster trying to manipulate my family. You see what you need to see to feel in control. His voice was gentle. But control is an illusion, Genevieve. The only real power you have is the choice of who to trust when you are out of options. Genevieve looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to me. I am going to Papa's trunk, she said. I am going to find what he left us. And I am going to protect this family the way he would have wanted. She walked out of the kitchen. I started to follow, but Alaric caught my arm. Let her go, he said. She is hurting. She is angry, and anger is useful right now. Let her channel it into something productive. I looked toward the hallway where my daughter had disappeared. What if she finds something in that trunk that makes this worse? Then we will deal with it, Alaric said, together. Artemisia had been sitting very quietly through all of this. Now she looked up at Alaric with those dark, knowing eyes. Are you going to hurt us? She asked. No. Are you going to hurt the bad man, Mr. Crane? Yes. Good. She stood up, walked to him, looked up at his face with absolute seriousness. I am glad you are here. I was scared before, but now I am less scared. Why? Because monsters can hurt other monsters, and we are just people. She reached out and took his hand. Thank you for being the kind of monster that helps people. Then she went upstairs, leaving Alaric standing in my kitchen, looking like he had been struck. Anselm was the last to speak. So you are like 800 years old, he asked. Yes. That is really old, David. Yes. Do you know everything about everything? No, I know a great deal about some things, nothing about most things, and less than I should about the things that matter. Anselm considered this. Can you teach me to fight vampires? Anselm, I said. What if there are vampires? I should know how to fight them. That is just practical, Mama. Despite everything, I almost smiled. I can teach you some things, Alaric said. But your mother is right. This is not a fight for children. I am 8. Papa started teaching me to shoot when I was 7. Did he, Yeah, he said knowing how to protect yourself was important, even if you never had to use it. Alaric looked at me. Your husband was a wise man. He was, I said quietly. We stood there in the kitchen, the three of us, while the morning sun climbed higher in the sky and the temperature dropped, and somewhere out there, Mordecai Crane was planning to murder my daughter and turn my land into darkness. And I thought about Barnabas, about what he would have done, what he would have wanted, and I knew with absolute certainty that he would have done exactly what I was doing. He would have stood with the monster who wanted to help, because sometimes the only way to fight a monster was with another monster, and sometimes trust was not about knowing someone was safe. It was about knowing they would stand between you and the darkness when the darkness came. Genevieve found it 3 hours later. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. Fast, urgent, the footsteps of someone who had discovered something important. She came into the kitchen holding a wooden box I had never seen before. Small, plain, with a lock that had been broken. It was hidden in the false bottom of Papa's trunk, she said. She set the box on the table. Behind the journal, you read. Inside the box were 3 things: a silver knife, a vial of clear liquid, and a letter folded and sealed with wax. Genevieve opened the letter with shaking hands, read it aloud. To my beloved Rosalind, she began, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have discovered the truth about this land. I am sorry I did not tell you while I was alive. I thought I could protect you from it. I was wrong. Her voice caught. The knife is silver, pure silver, blessed by my grandmother, who was the last of a bloodline that goes back 8 generations. We were hunters, Rosalind. My family hunted the creatures that walked in darkness. I tried to leave that life behind when I married you. I wanted to be a rancher, a husband, a father. I wanted to be normal. She paused, swallowed hard. But the blood does not forget. And when I saw the evidence near the old church, I knew I could not run from what I was. The land we chose is sanctuary ground. The creatures cannot take it by force, but they will try other ways. Legal ways, financial ways. If Mordecai Crane comes to collect the debt, know this, he is not human. He is ancient and patient and cruel, and he wants this land for purposes that will bring darkness to this entire territory. The vial contains water from the sacred spring at the heart of the property. It will burn any vampire who touches it. Use it to protect yourself and our children. And know this, my love, our daughters carry the bloodline. They have the gift, Genevieve especially. She will be able to sense them, to fight them if she chooses. I pray she never has to make that choice. But if she does, I pray she is braver than I was. Protect our family, protect this land, and if you find someone willing to stand against the darkness with you, trust them, even if they are darkness themselves. All my love, Barnabas. Genevieve set down the letter. Her hands were shaking. He knew, she whispered. He knew everything. I looked at my daughter, at the silver knife on the table, at the understanding dawning in her eyes. The bloodline, I said to Alaric. What does that mean? It means, he said slowly, that your husband came from a line of vampire hunters, and that gift passes through blood. Your daughters carry it. What gift? The ability to sense us, to see through our disguises, to know when we are near. He looked at Genevieve, and in some cases, the ability to fight us, to resist our influence, to wield weapons that would kill us. Genevieve picked up the silver knife. The moment her fingers touched the handle, the blade began to glow, faint, soft, like moonlight on water. I felt it, she breathed. I felt it the moment you arrived. I thought it was just suspicion, just me being protective of Mama. But it was more than that. I could feel that you were wrong, that you did not belong. She looked up at Alaric, and I feel it now with Mr. Crane. Every time he comes near, my skin crawls, like something in my blood is screaming at me to run. That is the hunter blood, Alaric said, recognizing the predator. Can I kill him with this, Genevieve? I stood up. Can I? She insisted, looking at Alaric. If you are strong enough, he said. If you are fast enough, if you are willing to get close enough to drive that blade into his heart. I am. You are 16 years old. I am my father's daughter. She held the knife steady. And if that monster thinks he is going to hurt my family, he is going to learn what it means to face a hunter bloodline that has been killing his kind for 8 generations. I looked at my daughter, at the way she stood, the way she held that knife like it was an extension of her own arm. And I saw Barnabas in her, saw his courage, his determination, his absolute refusal to let darkness win without a fight. We do this together, I said, all of us. We are a family. We fight together or we do not fight at all. Genevieve looked at me, then at Alaric, then at Artemisia, who had come silently into the kitchen and was watching everything with those dark, all-seeing eyes. Together, she agreed. Alaric was quiet for a long moment. There is something you should know, he said. 2 days ago, I received a message from my former council. The vampires I once ruled. They know I am here. They know I have been living among humans, and they have given me an ultimatum. What kind of ultimatum? Return to my throne. Reclaim my power. Rule as I once ruled. He paused. Or be declared traitor and hunted until I am destroyed. When do you have to decide? By the new moon, the same night as Mordecai's ritual. February 20th. What will you choose? I asked. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the weight of centuries, the weariness of immortality, the loneliness of never belonging anywhere. I spent 8 centuries being a king, he said. I think it is time I learned how to be something else, even if it cost you everything, especially if it cost me everything. He turned to Genevieve. Your father's letter said to trust someone willing to stand against the darkness, even if they are darkness themselves, so cause. He met her eyes, and I am darkness. I have been darkness for longer than your family has existed, but I am asking you to trust that I can be something more. Genevieve looked at him for a long time. Then she held out the silver knife handle first. Teach me how to kill them, she said. And Alaric Blackwood, the 800-year-old vampire king, took the knife from my 16-year-old daughter's hands. First lesson, he said, you have to be willing to die for what you are protecting, because they will not hesitate to kill you. And if you hesitate even for a moment, you lose. I will not hesitate, Genevieve said. Good. He handed the knife back. Second lesson, you cannot fight alone. Your strength is not in the blade. It is in the family standing behind you. He looked at me, at Artemisia, at Anselm, who had been watching from the doorway. Your father knew that, he said. That is why he built this life, this home, this family, because family is the only thing strong enough to stand against eternity. I felt something crack open in my chest. This creature who had lived 800 years, who had ruled kingdoms and commanded armies and walked through centuries of darkness, understood what Barnabas had known. That family was everything. That love was the only thing that lasted. That a home was worth dying for. 23 days, I said, until the new moon on February 20th. 23 days, Alaric agreed. What do we do? He looked at me. And for the first time since he arrived at my door in the blizzard, I saw something in his face that looked almost like hope. We prepare, he said. We train. We gather what weapons we can. We fortify this land. And when Mordecai Crane comes to take what is not his, we show him what it means to face a family that will not break. Artemisia stepped forward. And me, she asked quietly. What do? I am the one he wants, the one he needs for his ritual. Alaric knelt down in front of her. You stay safe, he said. You stay with your mother and your sister and your brother, and you trust that I will die before I let him touch you. Promise. I promise it's fine, huh? She looked at him with those dark eyes that saw everything. I believe you, she said. And in that moment in my kitchen, with winter sunlight streaming through the windows, and my children gathered around me, and an 800-year-old vampire kneeling on my floor, making promises to protect my daughter, I understood something. I understood that the next 23 days would change everything. That when the new moon rose on February 20th, we would either stand victorious or we would fall into darkness. But we would stand together. And that was the only thing that mattered. That was the only thing worth fighting for. Family, home, love. The things that lasted longer than empires. The things that shone brighter than any darkness. The things worth dying for. And if we had to trust a monster to protect those things, then we would trust him. Because sometimes salvation came from the most unlikely places. And sometimes the difference between a monster and a hero was simply the choice they made when it mattered most. Alaric Blackwood was choosing us. And we were choosing to believe him. The rest would be written in blood and silver and moonlight, but it would be written together. And that made all the difference. The days that followed moved with a particular intensity of time running out. Alaric trained Genevieve every morning before dawn. I would wake to the sound of their footsteps in the yard, the clash of steel on steel, his voice low and patient as he taught my daughter how to move, how to strike, how to survive. He taught her that speed mattered more than strength, that vampires were impossibly fast, and the only way to fight them was to be faster in the moment that counted, the moment the blade found its mark. He taught her to watch the eyes, that a vampire's true intentions showed their first a split second before they moved, that if she could read that tell, she could stay ahead of them. He taught her to use her hunter blood, to trust the crawling sensation on her skin when a vampire was near, to let that instinct guide her blade when her eyes could not follow their movements. And he taught her something else, something I heard him say one morning when I stood at the kitchen window, watching them in the pale pre-dawn light. You fight for them, he said, his voice carrying across the frozen yard. Every strike, every movement, every choice you make in the moment the blade is in your hand, you fight for your mother and your sister and your brother. Not for yourself, because if you fight for yourself, fear will find you. But if you fight for them, there is no room for anything except purpose. Genevieve had stood there, silver knife in hand, her breath making clouds in the cold air. I understand, she said, and I saw in her face that she did. Artemisia spent those days close to home, close to me. We did not speak of what was coming, but I saw it in her eyes every time she looked toward the horizon, every time a rider appeared on the road. Every time the wind changed and brought strange scents from the direction of the old church ruins. She was afraid, but she was also brave in the way that children are brave when they have no choice. When the adults around them are preparing for war, and all they can do is trust that those adults will keep them safe. She helped me with the cooking, with the mending, with the 100 small tasks that kept a household running. And sometimes in the quiet moments, she would sit beside me and lean her head against my shoulder and say nothing at all. Those moments mattered more than any words could have. Anselm threw himself into learning everything Alaric would teach him, how to recognize the signs of vampire presence, how to prepare silver bullets from the cache Barnabas had hidden in the cellar, how to mix the sacred spring water with salt to create barriers that would burn any vampire who tried to cross them. He was 8 years old and learning how to fight monsters. I hated it. I hated that my children's innocence was being stripped away, that they were learning about darkness when they should have been learning about joy. But I also understood that this was survival, and survival had never been gentle. Alaric and I spoke little during those days. There was too much work to do, too many preparations to make. But sometimes late at night after the children were asleep, I would find him standing in the yard looking up at the moon as it grew thinner each night, counting down to the new moon, to the choice he would have to make, to the sacrifice that was coming. Do you regret coming here? I asked him one night. We were standing in the barn. He had been reinforcing the walls with symbols drawn in sacred spring water, creating a sanctuary within the sanctuary, a place where the children could be safe if everything went wrong. He stopped, set down the brush, turned to look at me. No, he said, even knowing what it will cost you, especially knowing what it will cost me. He walked closer, stopped a few feet away. For 800 years, I have been moving through the world untouched, he said, watching humans live and die and feeling nothing except a distant curiosity about what it must be like to care about something that would not last forever. He paused. And then I knocked on your door, and you shared your last bread with me, and for the first time in 3 centuries, I felt something real. What did you feel? Hunger, he said quietly. Not for blood, for this, for family, for purpose, for the particular kind of meaning that only comes from knowing your days are limited and choosing to spend them on something that matters. I looked at him in the lamplight. at this creature who had lived longer than empires, who had commanded armies and ruled kingdoms and walked through centuries of darkness, who had found meaning in splitting wood for a widow and her children. When the new moon comes, I said, and you have to choose between your throne and us. I have already chosen. It will cost you everything. Yes. Your immortality, your power, your place in their world. Yes. You will become human, mortal. You will age. You will die. Yes. I stepped closer. Why? He looked at me for a long moment. Because 800 years is too long to be alone, he said. And 30 years with people I love is more valuable than eternity with people I rule. Something in my chest broke open. You love us, I whispered. I love you, he corrected gently. I love your children. I love this land and this life and the particular way the sun looks when it rises over your mountains. I love the sound of Anselm's voice when he is explaining something he thinks is important. I love the way Artemisia sees the world. I love Genevieve's fierce, protective heart. He paused. And I love you, Rosalind Orne. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you burned that foreclosure notice, rather than let Mordecai see you afraid. I love that you shared your last bread with a stranger. I love that you are still standing after 3 years of fighting to hold your family together alone. Tears were running down my face. I am not asking you to love me back, he said. I know I am a monster. I know what I have done, what I have been. I know I do not deserve. I kissed him. I do not know what made me do it. Grief or loneliness or the terrible understanding that in days he was going to sacrifice everything he was to save my daughter, that he was going to become mortal and fragile and temporary because he had found something worth dying for. I kissed him, and he went very still for a moment. Then his arms came around me, careful and gentle, like he was afraid I would break, like I was something precious. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I have lived 800 years, he whispered, and I have never felt anything like this. Neither have I. Not even with your husband. I thought about Barnabas, about our life together, about the love we had built over 15 years of marriage. I loved Barnabas with everything I had, I said. He was my partner, my friend, the father of my children, and I will carry that love with me until I die. I pulled back to look at Alaric's face. But you quoi? I said, you are something different, something I did not expect, something I did not know I needed until you knocked on my door in a blizzard and I saw centuries of loneliness in your eyes. What am I to you? You are the choice I am making, I said. Not the one I planned, not the one that makes sense, but the one I am making anyway. Because sometimes love is not about replacing what you lost. It is about finding what you did not know you were looking for. He kissed me again, soft and reverent, and for just a moment we were not a widow and a vampire preparing for war. We were just two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to hold on. The new moon came on a Thursday, February 20th, 1887. I woke that morning with ice in my veins and fire in my chest, knowing that by nightfall everything would be decided. Either we would stand victorious or we would fall. Either Artemisia would be safe or she would be gone. Either Alaric would become human or he would return to his throne. There was no middle ground, no compromise, no negotiation. Just the choice, just the fight, just us against the darkness. I made breakfast for my children, watched them eat, memorized their faces in the morning light. Genevieve fierce and ready, the silver knife tucked into her belt. Anselm trying to be brave, his small hands clenched into fists under the table. And Artemisia quiet and pale, her dark eyes moving between all of us like she was trying to memorize us too. We are going to win, I told them. How do you know? Anselm asked. Because we have to, I said simply. Because losing is not an option. Because I did not survive 3 years alone to lose my daughter now. I looked at each of them in turn. We are a family, I said, and family does not break. Not for monsters, not for magic, not for anything. Artemisia got up from her chair, came to me, wrapped her arms around my waist and held on tight. I am scared, Mama, she whispered. I know, baby, but I trust you. I held my daughter close and breathed in the scent of her hair and felt my heart break and mend and break again. You stay with Genevieve, I said. You do not leave her side, no matter what happens. Do you understand? Yes, Mama. Good girl. Alaric came in from the barn just after noon. He looked different, harder, older, like the weight of 800 years had settled fully onto his shoulders, and he was carrying it deliberately, consciously for the last time. They are coming, he said. How many? Mordecai and 3 others. His inner circle. When sunset, they will come for her at sunset. I looked at my children. Genevieve, take your sister and brother to the barn, the sanctuary room. Lock yourselves in. Do not come out unless Alaric or I come for you. Mama. Now, she saw something in my face, something that made her stand up without argument. Come on, she said to Artemisia and Anselm. Let's go. I watched them leave. Watched Genevieve put her arm around Artemisia's shoulders. Watched Anselm look back at me one last time before the barn door closed behind them. Then I turned to Alaric. What do? We fight, he said. You and I, here on this land. We use the sanctuary ground, the sacred water. Everything your husband left us. We hold them off until sunset passes and the window for the ritual closes. And if we cannot, then I invoke the mortality bargain. I went very still. What is that? He looked at me with ancient eyes. It is an old law, older than I am, older than Mordecai. It states that a vampire king can sacrifice his immortality to save an innocent life, but it has to be willing, complete, irrevocable. What does it do? It gives me 60 seconds of absolute power. The full strength of 800 years of life concentrated into 1 minute. Enough to destroy Mordecai and break his ritual. Enough to end this. And then I become human, fully, completely human. I age, I become mortal. I die eventually the way all humans die. I stepped closer to him. You planned this from the beginning. I hoped I would not have to use it, but yes. I have been preparing for this choice since the day I discovered Mordecai's plan. You were always going to give up your immortality for us. Yes. Why did you not tell me? Because I needed you to trust me for who I was trying to be, not for what I was willing to sacrifice. Tears were burning behind my eyes. You are going to die, I said. Eventually, in 30 or 40 years, maybe more. You are going to die because of us. I am going to live because of you, he corrected. For the first time in 800 years, I'm going to actually live. He cupped my face in his hands. Immortality is not life, Rosalind. It is existence. It is watching the world turn without you while you stand still and feel nothing. I do not want that anymore. I want to feel the sun on my skin and know that I have limited days and choose to spend them here with you building something real. What if I lose you anyway, I whispered. What if you become human and Mordecai still wins? Then you will have fought beside someone who loved you, and that is more than most people get in a lifetime. I kissed him, hard and desperate and full of all the things I could not say. And then the sun began to set, and they came. Mordecai Crane rode into my yard at the exact moment the sun touched the horizon. 3 other vampires rode with him. Old ones, powerful ones. I could feel it in the air, the weight of their age, the cold press of their presence against the sanctuary ground. They stopped at the property line. Could not cross, not without invitation, not while the sacred protections held. Mrs. Thorne, Mordecai called. Such a lovely evening, perfect for a ritual. Do you not think? You are not welcome here, I shouted back. Am I not? But I hold the deed to this land. Legally, it is mine. Legally does not mean actually. Semantics, he smiled. Give me the child and I will forget the debt. You and your other children can stay. I will even deed the land back to you free and clear. Liar. I give you my word. Your word means nothing. His smile faded. Then I will take her by force. You cannot cross the boundary. No, he agreed, but I can wait. The sanctuary protections will fall at midnight when the new moon is highest, and then there will be nothing standing between me and what I want. He looked past me to where Alaric stood. Hello, old friend, he said. Come to watch me complete what you started 800 years ago. How fitting. You will not touch her, Alaric said. I think I will. In fact, I think I will make you watch. I think I will make you see what happens when you choose weakness over power. When you choose these fragile temporary creatures over your own kind. I chose humanity over monstrosity. You chose failure. Mordecai's voice turned cold. But it is not too late. Reclaim your throne. Stand with me. Together we can create a kingdom of eternal night. We can rule as we were meant to rule. I am done ruling. Then you are done living. Mordecai raised his hand, and the 3 vampires with him moved forward, testing the boundary, pressing against the invisible wall that separated sacred ground from the corrupted world beyond. I felt the protections shudder. They are weakening it, Alaric said quietly. They will break through before midnight. What do we do? He looked at me. I invoke the bargain now, before they breach, while I still have the element of surprise. No. Rosalind, listen to me. He gripped my shoulders. If I wait, they will overwhelm us. They will take Artemisia. They will complete the ritual. This is the only way. There has to be another way. There is not. The protections shuddered again. Harder this time. I could see cracks forming in the air, like glass beginning to fracture. I need you to trust me, Alaric said. One last time. I looked into his eyes, saw 800 years of loneliness ending, saw 30 years of love beginning, saw the choice he was making, had already made, would make again and again if given the chance. I trust you, I whispered. He kissed me, fast and fierce. Then he turned to face Mordecai and the three vampires pressing against the failing boundary. And he began to speak words in a language I did not know. Old words, ancient words, words that made the air shimmer and the ground beneath my feet tremble. The vampires at the boundary froze. Mordecai's eyes went wide. No, he breathed. You would not dare. I invoke the mortality bargain, Alaric said, his voice ringing across the yard. I sacrifice 800 years of immortality for 60 seconds of absolute power. I give my throne, my crown, my place among the eternal. I give it all freely and completely to save the life of an innocent child. Light exploded from him. Pure white, blinding light that made me shield my eyes. When I could see again, Alaric was changing. His form was shifting, growing, becoming something both more and less than what he had been. The Vampire King rising one last time, the full power of 8 centuries of life burning through him like a star. 60 seconds, he said, his voice layered with harmonics that made my bones ache. And then I am human, but for 60 seconds I am everything I have ever been, everything I could ever be. And it is enough. He moved, too fast for my eyes to follow. One moment he was standing beside me. The next he was at the boundary, his hand passing through the sacred protections like they were not there. He grabbed the first vampire by the throat, lifted him off his horse, and as I watched, the vampire began to turn to ash, crumbling in Alaric's grip like paper in a fire. The second vampire tried to run. Alaric was faster. The third vampire pulled a blade. Alaric broke it with his bare hand. 30 seconds. Mordecai backed his horse away, his face a mask of fury and fear. You fool, he snarled. You are sacrificing eternity for them, for mortals who will die and leave you alone again. I will never be alone again, Alaric said, because I will die with them, and that is worth more than all the eternity you can offer. He advanced. Mordecai raised his hands, dark power crackling between his fingers. I am older than you, he said, stronger than you. I will not fall to a king who has given up his crown. You are wrong. Alaric's hand shot out, grabbed Mordecai by the chest. You are not stronger. You are emptier. You have spent centuries building power on the backs of fear and debt and darkness, but you have never built anything that mattered. You have never loved anything more than you loved control. He began to squeeze. Mordecai screamed, and that, Alaric said quietly, is why you lose. 45 seconds. The light around Alaric was beginning to fade. I could see cracks forming in his skin like he was breaking apart from the inside. Alaric, I shouted, stay back. Mordecai was disintegrating in his grip, turning to ash and bone and ancient dust. But with his last breath, Mordecai smiled. The ritual, he gasped. Already begun. Blood on the altar. And I understood. Mordecai had not come to take Artemisia tonight. He had taken her hours ago, before we even knew they were coming, before we had time to prepare. My scream tore through the evening air. Artemisia! I ran for the barn, threw open the door to the sanctuary room. Genevieve was on the floor unconscious, blood trickling from her temple. Anselm was tied to a post, gagged, his eyes wide with terror, and Artemisia was gone. No, I breathed. No, no, no. Alaric appeared behind me. 55 seconds. The light was almost gone. His skin was fracturing like porcelain. The church ruins, he said, his voice strained. The ritual is there. We have to. He collapsed. The 60 seconds were over. When I reached him, he was gasping, his body convulsing as 800 years of immortality drained away and mortality flooded in to replace it. I cradled his head in my lap. Stay with me, I begged. The ritual, he gasped. You have to. Stop the ritual. Halpauk, blood, he breathed. Sacred blood, on sacred ground, breaks the corruption. His eyes found mine. Your blood, Rosalind. You are Barnabas's wife, his heir. His bloodline runs in you now. Your blood on the altar will break Mordecai's spell. But Artemisia will be safe. If you stop the ritual, if you choose. His hand found mine, squeezed weakly. I cannot go with you. I am too weak. But you can do this. And I looked down at him, at this man who had been a king and had chosen to be human, who had sacrificed everything for my daughter, who was asking me to be brave enough to finish what he started. I kissed his forehead. Genevieve, I called. Genevieve. My daughter stirred, groaned, opened her eyes. Mama. Take care of him, I said. Take care of Alaric and your brother. And if I do not come back, you are coming back. If I do not come back, you are strong enough to protect them. You are your father's daughter, and you are mine, and you will survive this. I stood, took the silver knife from Genevieve's belt, took the last vial of sacred spring water from the shelf, and I ran. The old church ruins were 2 miles across the frozen fields. I ran the entire way, my lungs burning, my heart hammering Barnabas's name on my lips like a prayer. The moon was rising, new and dark and terrible. I could see the altar from 100 yards away. Ancient stone, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. And on the altar, tied with ropes that glowed with dark magic, was my daughter. Artemisia saw me. Her eyes went wide. "Mama!" she screamed. "Mama, run!" But I did not run. I walked forward, across the corrupted ground, toward the altar where Mordecai had already spilled her blood, had already begun the words that would tear open the sky and bring eternal darkness. Except Mordecai was dead, and the ritual had no master to complete it. It was tearing itself apart, wild magic spiraling out of control, fed by Artemisia's blood and the dark moon and the corrupted earth. I climbed onto the altar, cut the ropes binding my daughter, pulled her into my arms. "I have you," I whispered. "I have you, baby. You are safe." "Mama, the magic." "I know." I looked at the symbols carved into the stone, at the blood already spilled, at the ritual spinning out of control, and I understood what Alaric had meant. Sacred blood on sacred ground breaks the corruption, but this ground was not sacred anymore. Mordecai had poisoned it, so I had to make it sacred again. I took the silver knife, cut my palm, let my blood, Barnabas's bloodline, the hunter blood, the sacred blood, drip onto the altar, and I spoke the only words I knew that mattered. "I claim this ground," I said, "in the name of my husband who died protecting it, in the name of my children who will live on it, in the name of the family that has stood here for generations. I claim this ground as sanctuary, as home, as sacred earth that will not yield to darkness." My blood hit the stone, and the entire ritual shattered. Light exploded outward, pure and white and clean, washing over the corrupted earth like a wave. I felt it pass through me, through Artemisia, through the ruins and the folds and the land beyond. Felt it cleanse, heal, restore. When the light faded, we were kneeling on bare stone in the ruins of an old church. The dark magic was gone. The corruption was broken, and my daughter was safe in my arms. We made it back to the ranch just before dawn. Genevieve met us at the door, Anselm clinging to her side, both of them exhausted but whole. "Mama," Genevieve breathed. "You did it." "We did it," I corrected. I looked past her into the house. "Where is Alaric?" "Bedroom. Mama, he is aging. I can see it happening." I ran. He was lying on my bed, the same bed I had shared with Barnabas, the same bed I had slept at alone for 3 years. And he looked different, older, more human. The sharp, ageless quality that had marked him as vampire was gone. In its place was something softer, more fragile, more real. His eyes opened when I entered. "You stopped it," he said. "I stopped it. Artemisia, safe, whole, sleeping in Genevieve's room." He smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Then it was worth it," he said. I sat beside him, took his hand. "You are human now." "Yes." "You are going to age." "Yes." "You are going to die." Eventually, I leaned down, pressed my forehead to his. "Then we will age together," I whispered, "and we will die together, and we will spend every day in between building a life that matters." "Is that a proposal, Mrs. Thorne?" "It is a promise, Mr. Blackwood." He pulled me down, kissed me, and this time his lips were warm, human, alive. We were married in the spring, a simple ceremony, just family and a few neighbors. The children stood beside us, dressed in their Sunday best, smiling for the first time in months. Genevieve gave me away, walked me down the aisle of the small church in town, and placed my hand in Alaric's with a look that said, "I trust you to take care of her." Artemisia scattered wildflowers. Anselm carried the rings. And Alaric Blackwood, who had been a vampire king for 800 years, became my husband with tears running down his very human face. 5 years have passed since that day. 5 years of building a life on sacred ground. Of watching Alaric age slowly, gracefully into the man he was always meant to be. Of watching my children grow strong and brave and whole. The debt disappeared with Mordecai's death. When Alaric's lawyers investigated, they discovered that Mordecai's entire financial empire had been built on nothing but manipulation and dark magic. Once he was gone, it crumbled. The loan documents dissolved into ash. The land became ours free and clear, the way it should have been all along. Genevieve is 21 now. She has taken over the hunter training, teaching others in the territory how to protect themselves from the darknesses that still exist in shadowed places. She wears her father's silver knife on her belt and carries his courage in her heart. Artemisia is 16. She writes histories of the old world, recording everything Alaric remembers before the memories fade. She has become the keeper of stories, the bridge between what was and what will be. Anselm is 13. Tall and strong, and so much like Barnabas, it sometimes takes my breath away. He works the ranch with Alaric, learning the land, learning what it means to build something that will outlast you. And Alaric, my Alaric is 57 years old now by appearance, fully human, fully mortal, fully completely alive. His hair is more gray than dark, his hands are calloused from work, his face has lines around the eyes from smiling. He is aging, and it is the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed. Last night we stood on the porch together, watching the sun set over our land, our sanctuary, our home. Do you regret it, I asked him, giving up eternity? He pulled me close. I regret nothing, he said. 800 years of existing is not worth one day of truly living. And I have lived more in these 5 years than I did in all the centuries before. How long do we have? I do not know. 20 years maybe. 30. However long we have is more than enough. Wishwai, he turned to face me, cupped my face in his weathered human hands, because I will spend every single day loving you, loving our children, loving this life we built together. And when we die, we will die knowing we chose love over power, family over eternity, home over empire. He kissed me softly. That is worth everything, Rosalind. That is worth dying for, and living for, and fighting for. I leaned into him, watched the sun sink below the horizon, watched the first stars appear in the darkening sky, and I thought about the night he knocked on my door in a blizzard, about how I had shared my last bread with a stranger, about how that stranger had become my husband, my partner, my love, about how sometimes salvation came from the most unlikely places, about how sometimes the difference between a monster and a hero was simply the choice they made when it mattered most. Alaric Blackwood had chosen us. And in choosing us, he had found what 800 years of immortality could never give him. He had found home, he had found family, he had found love, and when his human heart finally stops beating, he will die knowing he lived. Really, truly lived. Because love, real, honest, mortal love lasts longer than any darkness, shines brighter than any power, matters more than any crown. And as I stand on my porch with my husband's arms around me and my children safe inside and my land protected and whole, I understand what Barnabas tried to teach me before he died, that a life is not measured in years. It is measured in moments, in choices, in the people you love and the family you build and the home you protect, in the bread you share with strangers, in the trust you give when trust is hard, in the hope you hold on to when hope seems impossible. We held on, we trusted, we hoped, and we won. Not because we were stronger than the darkness, but because we were together. And together is the only thing that matters, the only thing worth fighting for, the only thing worth dying for, the only thing worth living for. Family, home, love, forever.